Monkey D. Luffy is from the sky, as is Monkey D. Dragon, as is Monkey D. Garp, and Oda has been painfully obviously drawing the connections between the Shandian tribe and the monkey family since as early as East Blue. Skypiea is an arc that only continues to appreciate over time, but even the most ardent of Skypiea appreciators could not have predicted this gem that has been stumbled upon. This video was inspired by Randy Troy's examination of Luffy's lineage. He connected a lot of the dots that I reference and expand on, and a link to his video will be in the description for your viewing curiosities. But look, I was skeptical at first, but there's an increasing avalanche of evidence that points to Luffy being a descendant of the Shandian tribe. And again, it's not just Luffy. In fact, every known member of the monkey family has a distinct connection, or even connections plural to the Shandian tribe. So let's go as far back as we can to the oldest of known monkey men, Mr. Monkey D. Garp, and specifically his funky dog hat. This headwear is, to say the very least, evocative of the head garbs reserved for the chiefs of the Shandian tribe. In both the modern day and in the flashback 400 years ago, the respective chief at the time had their heads nestled within the mouth of a beast of their choosing. Every new chief appears to select a different animal, but the style of the headwear is always the same. So sure, it could be an aesthetic coincidence, but it could be more, much more. Just like Garp's balls. In particular, the colossal ball and chain he used to assault the Thousand Sunny at the end of the Water 7 saga, which is the exact same weapon that the warrior Calgara used 400 years ago, albeit his was on a much smaller scale. So this is an interesting set of scenarios. With the headwear, Garp was the one first shown wearing it. So that could have been a situation where Oda designed Garp and without any thought then later decided, hey, that'd be a cool idea to use for these here Shandian chiefs. But with the weapon, Oda introduced Calgara first and then gave it to Garp later on. So what we have here is Garp being caught in a narrative spit roast, flanked at both ends by references to the Shandian tribe. He and Calgara are both legendary heroes as well, but I'm not going to count that because, being a legendary warrior, it's pretty vague criteria in this world thoroughly packed full of legendary warriors. So let's move down the sperm count to Monkey D. Dragon, a man with a tattoo that has been frequently compared to Wiper's tribal face tattoo by fans. This is, by itself, pretty flimsy evidence, because the tattoos themselves look nothing alike. The only thing they have in common is being on the left side of the face. And you know what? They could be connected, as in perhaps a marking on this side of the face signifies leadership in times of great struggle, with Wiper adopting it for the 400-year war with the Skypians, and Dragon donning it to lead the revolution against the 900-year war against the world government. It's definitely possible, but there is a connection that I like much more better, which is Dragon's voice actor, Hidekatsu Shibata. Quite the iconic, currently 87-year-old man who only voices one other character in all of the One Piece, and that character just so happens to be the warrior Calgara. And Toei does have a bit of a habit of choosing the same voice actor for family lines. Nico Robin and Nico Olvia are both voiced by Yuriko Yamaguchi, for example. And hey, maybe the producers just thought that this very old man was the right old man for both of these jobs. But I personally find it very intriguing that Dragon and Calgara have perhaps been fatesomely connected here. And someone else I should bring up is Yuki Minaguchi, who voices Calgara's daughter Moose, which is such a small role that it doesn't even appear on her Wikipedia page, but you know what other role does pop up? Well, that would be her only other voice in One Piece, Portgas D. Rouge, which isn't, a direct connection to Luffy, but Rouge did own the womb that produced Luffy's brother, so that feels pretty damn connected to me. And as for the man in question, Luffy has the most direct link to the Shandian tribe via the cover of Volume 27, where Oda pulls a Red Bull and gives Luffy wings, in addition to a very cheeky wink. It's the kind of wink that says, oh, why does Luffy have wings? Yeah, well, that's a secret, or is it? Wink. This volume cover is quite possibly the most overanalyzed in the One Piece fandom, and for good reason, because this wink is very, very odd. I cannot emphasize this enough. Luffy never winks. I'm not sure if he's physically capable, at least not in the manga. The only other example I can find of him winking was in One Piece Film Z after chugging a bottle of some sweet, sweet milk. But that's not canon. And there is a confirmed deeper meaning to this wink. It's done on purpose to replicate the full island of Jaya, which becomes a skull with the missing left eye. So Luffy is winking to represent that missing eye, and Luffy's open right eye represents the location of the golden city of Shandora. Plus, if Luffy existed in the real world, Oda said that he would be from Brazil. I don't know why I said it like that. And the Shandian culture and aesthetic seems to take heavy inspiration from Aztec and Mayan culture. There's even one point where you can flat out see Oda redrawing drawing Quetzalcoatl. Now, to be completely fair before you all, I'm actually me in the comments. The Aztec, Maya, and even Incan empires never extended to Brazil to the best of my not very much knowledge. And here's where it's tempting to say that Oda does extensive research, and if he meant for Luffy to be part of Mexico-inspired culture, then Oda would have simply made him Mexican. And to which I say, he did. Oda did have final approval over casting Mexican actor Iñaki Godoy, so I do still think we're very much in business here. Plus look, Mexico, Brazil, colossal differences in every conceivable way. However, to man in Japan, those differences are much less. You look at them on a map, ideally a world map, not a One Piece world map, and you go, same region of the world, good enough. And it's at this point that I really stop believing that all of this is a coincidence. The monkey family, whether by fate or by design, have been repeatedly connected to the Shandian tribe, very much indicating that they could be their descendants. But there's a question that you're probably all asking right now. It's a very simple one-word question, which is wings? Question mark. Where are they, Internet man? Well, not all sky people have wings. In fact, the most iconic sky being of all, Enel, certainly did not. And while he wasn't native to Skypiea, he was a Birkin, another tribe of sky people whose island he blew it up. He completely destroyed it. It was a real dick move. But in any case, Enel should have wings, but he does not. And while the reason for this has never been revealed, the popular speculation is that he removed them in order to install his 4-piece drum kit. And you know, that's a fairly easy explanation, but Enel is not the only one. The next most famous skyman is Garnfall, and this slips past 99.9% of people, but he doesn't have wings either. It's generally assumed by fans that yes, he does have wings, but they're being covered up by his suit of armor. However, in the second From the Decks of the World cover story, we finally see Garnfall without armor or a cloak, and he's just rocking a casual t-shirt. There are no wings to be found at all. And look, if you've just detected a bit of a bizarre odor, that's because this is starting to smell like a trend. Because in the Nolan flashback, which I guess at this point is more like the Calgara flashback, when Shandora is shot up into the sky, we meet a third man without wings, and this is the unnamed god of Skypiea who ruled 400 years ago. So that's this many sky people without wings, and all three of them refer to themselves as God. So I'm just gonna say that a man, said to be a sun god not having wings does kind of make sense with this trend. And there are a couple of explanations for this non-wingedness. One is that Enel, Garnfall, and Old Smoking God all took on the title of god, and part of that responsibility may traditionally involve removing your wings. Because remember that everything's kind of backwards up at Skypiea. We see wings as a sign of ascension, angelic beings far beyond us. However, they see wings as everyday existence. Wings are the feature of the common man, and not at all befitting of a god. I guess the idea being that a god should be able to fly without mortal wings, something like that. I don't know. I just know that this is clearly a purposeful decision made by Oda. Whatever the answer is, it's just part of sky culture that God has no wings. Whether that involves slicing them off upon ascension, or I guess descension, although the other option is a bit less brutal and that it's simply a genetic trait, that the wings are a dominant gene, but every now and then a recessive wingless child is born, and as a result of that, the child is then groomed, but not in a bad way, in a good way, there is good grooming, to become a future god. Because somewhere along the way, the culture of the sky citizens has dictated that children born without wings are extra holy and godsome. And just think about what would happen to us in the opposite situation. If a child was born with pristine white wings, then they'd receive an organized religious cult formed around them quicker than their first drop of delicious breast milk, or even delicious regular milk, or even literally delicious anything that wasn't a cult. That is the sheer speed at which this child would be deified. And that's also probably one of the only ways that someone like Garnfall could become a god. Because remember, he didn't even have the ability to use mantra, aka observation haki, so other than a polka-dotted Pegasus, he didn't bring a whole lot to the table. And pumpkins, so many pumpkins. But let's get back to Luffy, and the fact that we may have already seen his ancestors in the manga. I've been thinking about this idea a lot lately, perhaps too much, but repetition does not negate relevance. Oda had no idea how long One Piece was going to run for. Originally, it was a 5-year plan. We all know the deal, but Oda used that plan to wipe his butt after incurring uncontrollable adventure diarrhea. Oda was struck with the I can't stop having so much fun drawing my fictional pirate comic disease. But not predicting that it would run for close to 3 decades, he set up everything he needed to end the story by the time that Skypiea was complete. All of the necessary pieces are there, and they have been there for a very long time. And then the rest is all about how much fun we can have on this adventure before putting them together. That's the theory I subscribe to, which is why the endgame of One Piece is all of a sudden a very nostalgic affair. All of a sudden, characters, themes, and locations from specifically Alabasta and the Skypiea sagas are front and center again because they were always planned to be the integral elements to end this story. And so Oda may very well have provided us with Luffy's historical origins. And I now present to you a boy named Seto, the first Shandian we saw contract tree fever, to which he tried to really brutally scrape off with a rock, which is very owl looking. And I have seen this brought up over the years, but I've never taken it particularly seriously until now. But Seto looks exactly like Luffy in every way except for, the fashionable aesthetic elements that we can control. Observe, if we gave Seto a makeover, gave him a Luffy haircut, a stylish scar accessory under his right eye, and just plonk a straw hat on him, then what we have is just Luffy. This is relevant because Luffy has a very unique design in the One Piece world. He might seem simple, but no one has his face. No one except for this guy. And while they do start out being extremely different, as time goes on, Seto develops a series of very Luffy-like traits. My favorite of which is when the Shandian tribe make a move to execute Nolan's men early, and Seto just plonks himself in front of their cage and gives them the old Luffy serious stare down. The kind that tells you he's made up his simple mind, and you're gonna get hurt real bad if you take even a single step forward. Not that Seto could have really backed this up like Luffy can, but what's important is that the aura is definitely there. And then you know what happens? Seto goes on to marry a woman! Gasp. A woman named Moose, who we've already brought up in this video. She's the daughter of Calgara and the elected sacrifice to put a stop to the tree fever, claiming the lives of the Shandians. And to her credit, Moose wasn't hugely upset with this role. In fact, she was happy that she was going to meet the Sun God, which is the very first mention of the Sun God in the series. And overall, this is very will of D of Moose, to go to one's death with a smile. And speaking of D, Seto's name in Japanese is also how they would pronounce the Egyptian god Set, aka the god of storms, which is what the will of D is very much known for causing. So the theory from here is that these two conducted intercourse, which resulted in spawn. However, their child did not accompany them to the sky. And Randy Troy's idea here is that Seto and Moose's child was in the half of the house that remained on what would become known as Jaya. And whether it's that specific or not, it is possible and even likely that some tribe members were on the other half of the island when the knock-up stream activated. In fact, we don't even know for sure if Seto and Moose were shot up. In the manga, the only recognizable face we see in the sky is Calgara. So the whole family could have remained on the blue sea, or just the child. Either way, it works. In fact, the latter works even better because this could also explain where the D came from. Because sure, the Shandians do seem to have a solid connection to the ancient kingdom and likely the will of D as well. However, we don't know anyone within that tribe, past or present, who openly carried a D. So if the baby is left on the blue sea, then someone bearing a D lands on the island, finds the child and decides to raise them. All of a sudden, we have another D, and fate intervening as it always does. As well as going on to set up inherited will. Calgara's reason for wanting to take back his homeland and ringing the bell was friendship. He wanted to continue ringing that bell to make sure that Nolan heard, but he died in battle without being able to ring it again even a single time. And if Luffy is the descendant of Calgara, then 400 years later, he would go on to meet Nolan's descendant, Mont Blanc Cricket. And together they would complete the will of their respective ancestors. Cricket by helping Luffy get to Skypiea, and Luffy ringing the bell for him and solving the generation-spanning question of Cricket's heritage. But it's also much more than that. Because the original reason why the Shandians had a ritual of ringing the golden bell was to guide the souls of their ancestors back to their homeland. And thinking about it that way, what Luffy did was ring the golden bell not just for Cricket's sake, but also to potentially guide Nolan's soul back to Shandora, something that he may have been searching for the past 400 years after death. That sort of thing isn't out of the question in One Piece, a series where the human soul is confirmed to exist, as well as the concept of an afterlife, and even the idea of souls lingering in the human world. But also remember that those with the will of D are the enemies of the gods. Primarily false gods, like those nasty world nobles, or they're slightly less nasty but still bad and ill. And both Nolan and Calgara also fall into this category of being enemies of the gods, as they both took a stand against those with the title of god. Nolan kills Kashigami, the big old snake that the Shandians worshipped, and Calgara eventually doubled down on this by killing Kashigami's child, both of which were worshipped as gods. And not only that, but Calgara does so standing incredibly victoriously against a beautiful sunset, which might just be some lovely atmospheric framing, but given that we know for a fact that Oda already had the sun god idea in mind, given that the sun god was first mentioned a couple of chapters prior to this, and that he would go on to draw Luffy in the Nika position a handful of chapters after this one, I would argue that sticking Calgara in front of the sun is very intentional. Something that we should also note is that the golden bell itself, it has a name. It's called the Light of Shandora. Nothing, mind-blowing, but yet another persistent reference to the light and the dawn and the sun and all of that. But this would make it all the more meaningful when Wiper pleads with Luffy to ring bring the light of Shandora, to essentially complete this branch of his inherited will and ring the bell for his ancestor, with Luffy and Wiper actually being incredibly distant relatives. Wiper was hell-bent on being the one to complete Kalgara's will, but it would also make sense if he allowed another descendant of Kalgara to do so as well. And then there's this. During the climax of the Skypiea arc, the Shandian tribe elder remained in the village and stood praying in front of the statue of Kalgara, pleading with his spirit to protect everyone, a prayer which would go on to be answered by Luffy. The elder made a plea to Kalgara and Luffy answered, not with the drums of liberation as he would go on to use in the future, but on this occasion with the Bell of Friendship, a prophecy that was inscribed on the accompanying poneglyph. We are the ones who weave history with the reverberations of the Great Bell.